Welcome to Kumbasoftware's DPAA tutorials. This tutorial is about graphing status data. There are some other videos about the status information, about how to basically use it, how to filter it, and other things. But this video is focused exclusively on graphing that data and some of the neat features that you can use here. So I started out by selecting a couple of appliances, and we're going to start with the memory status. And one thing to note that when you see this, you've got a graphs tab here. And there's nothing in there right now, but I just want to point out that you have your standard status info and then a graphs tab. Now, not all status providers have something that is meaningfully graphable. This is when this shows up. So, for example, if I select multi-protocol gateway summary, there's nothing meaningful to graph here. You've got source domain, multi-protocol gateway. There's nothing really to graph here. So you're only going to get the graphs tab when there's something meaningfully graphable. Now when I want to create a graph, I can click on this graphs tab, and then I can go over here to the hamburger menu, and I can select add graph. So when I do that, I get a list of properties that are meaningfully graphable for the memory status provider. That is, we can have others. There are many, depending on which one you select, this property list is going to change. But I'm going to select, say, hold memory. And I want you to see that the graph name defaults to hold memory. If I go and select used memory, you see the used, it changed to used memory. Now I can always type in a new name here if I want to, but this is just a convenience for us. I'm going to go ahead and select finish. Now I'm going to start this on continuous monitoring, so set an update frequency, and I'm going to go to continuous monitoring here. And we're going to see that the hold memory across these two different appliances is pretty constantly changing. It's changing between these values, and we get two little line graphs that's showing that the production 1 hold memory. We also see the domain. In this case, it doesn't really make as much sense, but when you're doing different status providers that apply to a particular domain, you'll also see the domain name there. So it becomes useful to you if you have multiple domains selected and select using the same status provider across multiple appliances and multiple domains. So we see the two appliances returning this information. We can also change the graph style. So I can go down here and change it to an area chart. So if you like that kind of a chart better, you can show it as an area chart. And again, like I said, like before, we can go back to a line chart, and DPAA will remember the last chart style you had selected so that you can easily see, that way you don't have to reselect the chart style every time you come into this. So we're going to go down here, and we're going to go to System Usage Table 2 and show you another example of some of the things that we may run into. And again, we have some meaningfully graphable data here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Graphs, and I'm going to go Add a Graph. And I'm going to select the File Count field, and I'm going to select Finish. And then I'm going to go start this on Continuous Monitoring. It's not going to appear exactly the way you think it should appear. So what we're going to end up getting is we're going to end up getting some really unusual output here, and it's going to turn out to be a bit confusing, and there's a reason why. And that is because there are multiple kinds of tasks. You see the weirdity going on? It's like, what's happening here? It looks like it's going all over the place. There's something not right. And there's a reason for that, and that's because over here you see how we have different task names, and the file counts are wildly different between those different task names, and we're seeing all kinds of crazy stuff in here. And so these graphs are not quite showing up the way you'd really ideally want them to. And so there's a way to get control of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop this, and I'm going to go here and I'm going to put in a filter. And what that filter is going to do for me is I'm going to select the task name, and I'm just going to select main. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to filter on the task name being main, and that way we only have the filter looking at one particular file count in there. Now I can start this up again, and as it flows through, it's actually going to not be so crazy as it was before. It's going to be a little bit more like it should be We're getting updates every 5 seconds, so we're going to get it more like we should expect to get it as this thing goes through. Now, because of different timings between the two different appliances, these may not line up correctly because it depends on how long it takes a particular appliance to respond to DPAA. And so it's a best effort to get these things in alignment, but every once in a while they'll also go out of alignment. Now, while this is running, one of the neat things that we can do is we can also create graphs on more than one field. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to add a new graph, and I'm going to select CPU, load, and memory. Now, when you select more than one field, and I use Control or click, you get the first suggested graph name, but I can just change this graph name to anything I want. So I can type in system usage, and then I can click finish. And what's cool, now we're still seeing the file count graph, so nothing's unusual here, but I'm going to go to system usage, and you're going to be like, wait a minute, what happened here? Well, what happened here is, why do we always have all this graph? Well, because it using all of this data. This is the source data for the graphs. So all this data is already here. So what we're seeing is, we're seeing prod2 default CPU, prod2 default load, and prod2 default memory, and then prod1 default CPU, prod1 default load, and prod1 default memory. So now you're starting to get an idea of how we're graphing all this information. And again, we can go change this graph style, and we can see this. So we can combine things like filters and update frequencies, and we can set up different kinds of graphs, and they're constantly graphing here. And even all the while we've been running this graph, we still have the memory status graph running over here in the line graph that we had created before. So you can see there's a lot of options for being able to graph the data, change the graph style, create as many graphs as you want. And as I said, if you close down DPAA and then restart it, you're going to come back with these graphs are still going to be defined for you, and then you can go about deleting them when you want. So if you say, okay, that one's a little busy, or maybe this one wasn't as useful, I can click on this tab and I can go here and I can select delete graph, and then you get an option to choose, and then I can delete this graph and now leave behind any graphs or graphs that I want. So that's basically it in a nutshell. You get to graph data live in a live monitor. You can monitor as many of these as you want at once. And of course, memory status, I think, is still up here running. So we can stop all our running providers by clicking on this convenience button above the status provider list. So if you have a desire for a license and you want to come out and get a demo, let us help you install it, whatever the case may be. Go out to www.kumbasoft.com. You have comments and suggestions, go to contact us link there, put in your information, and somebody from Kumbasoft will be getting back to you. Thanks for watching, and have a nice day.